All right, all right, all right. Big week, lots to talk about. Got some good guests. The trading volume on HBAR is up like 750%. Consensus went down. Convos were had. It's clear that there's a lot to talk about. I already see King Solomon requesting to speak. We have other people coming up. But what I want to do, I want to make this episode as efficient as I can because there's too much good stuff to pack in. But there is something lingering above all of it, which is Hedera, a bubble, all these conversations surrounding TPS versus TVL, basically long-term strategy versus short-term strategy, getting people onto the network, getting liquidity, bridging gaps, all those different types of things. But then also some of the nuances to those conversations. And, basically it was late at night and I was thinking like, like these conversations are kind of boiling down in the most simplest way, like TPS versus TVL. It's kind of what people are arguing about. So I just tweeted like, what's more important, everybody? And the poll kind of blew up and sparked a lot of good conversation. So there's a lot of good stuff to talk about there. But we're live on Twitter Spaces with another week in Hashgraph to unpack. Let's dive into the news and rumors mega thread on Twitter and get our first couple stories out of the way so I can start bringing some people up and chat about consensus. So what do we got going on this week? Let's get a couple things out of the way. Obviously, consensus. We have a great thread from co-founder of Twigital, Jesse, that breaks down some kind of highlights from that we'll chat about later. But big news. Google Cloud is doing their Web3 startup program, featuring grants from the HBAR Foundation, Aptos, Celloflow, Near, Solana Foundation, totaling up to $1 million USD each. And yeah, the first signs of Web3 spring emerge. Google definitely going in heavy. I've noticed that like a couple companies have really sprung up hiring, right? In Web3, moves being made. So, I mean, good signs, right? And I know that a lot of times folks are like, oh, but Google's a governing council member. Why would they do things with other networks? Well, I mean, it's a Web3 startup program, right? It's not a Hedera startup program. It's a Web3 startup program. And there's a lot of networks out there that all do some really great things. So one's not going to be right for everybody. And Google's a governing council member. I mean, they're Google. Of course, they're going to try a bunch of different things. They're not going to put all their eggs in one basket. I'm curious to see what comes out of that. Also on Metrica, talking about TPS, really at this rate, Hedera is set to hit 24 billion transactions per year, right? Let that sink in. That's kind of crazy. Just over 2 billion transactions a month. I mean, being an HBAR investor and community member for so long, for years and years, through single digit TPS, and now we're talking about billions and billions. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And of course, I mean, it's funny because as soon as we hit this massive amount of TPS, people want more. I see, even folks like Mance and Lehman and folks at the HBAR Foundation, all these different types of things, talking about even bigger numbers now. So it's clear that this is like, they're expecting TPS to continue going up substantially. They do say the network is throttled at 10,000 transactions per second. So it's clear this is a high throughput network, but already pinch me. We're going to talk about there was some updates in regards to regulations. And I know some folks from Hedera were kind of repping there. We're going to talk about Aberdeen and them tokenizing a bunch of stuff. Deloitte's making some moves in Web3 with some kind of breadcrumby kind of vibes. Earthlings, metaverse play on Hedera, just published a preview of their game environment. It looks awesome. I mean, It's in the Twitter thread pinned to the top of the spaces. Go check it out. I mean, gaming is a huge part of this. One thing that the HBAR Foundation mentioned late last year, I think, was the growth and investment in the gaming space on Web3 at some point outpaced DeFi. So gaming's big. I think that there's a lot of, building happening, but Earthling's making some moves. They've been a metaverse play, gaming play on Hedera for a long time. And seems like they got some stuff to show for it, and it looks amazing. So check it out. Saucer Swap hits 1 million all-time transactions, which is huge, but arguably even hugerer, is they've announced the integration of their exchange on CoinMarketCap. Basically, it makes it way easier for existing tokens on the Hedera token service to get listed on this data aggregator. So that's wild. And let's see what else is going on here. Hgraph stuff. We're going to talk a little about that. There's a new forum website, blah, blah, blah. What else is going on? Hashpack stuff. We got some Tesla things. We got a Masari crypto report. We got a bunch of stuff going on. And I know we're going to have Brady stop by. But with that, good evening from Ottawa, Canada, everyone. My name is Brandon Davenport, and I'm a creative developer, musician, and founder of Dirksen Davenport Incorporated. And like all of you, I'm a Hashgraph enthusiast. It is April 30th, and welcome to Hashgraph News and Rumours, episode 74, TPS versus TVL. This is a weekly show where we cover the top stories related to Hedera, HBAR, and everything in between. Broadcast live on Twitter Spaces every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and made available on all major podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube every Monday. Get all the info you need about the show and listen to past episodes at itsbrandond.com/HBAR. If you're listening live now, check out the Twitter thread pinned to the top of the spaces to take a deeper dive into each story. Also, everybody listening live, take a moment now, share the spaces, let your friends know you're listening. The more the merrier. You can also click the little comment button at the bottom right of the spaces to ask a question, share something interesting that listeners might like to know, and I will talk about it. And the show continues to grow from hundreds of listeners to thousands across all platforms, and that's because of you guys tuning in every week, awesome guests giving their time to the show, and supporters sending some HBAR here and there. This show is by far one of my favorite things to do. If you're interested in becoming a supporter of the show, please consider making an HBAR donation. It helps continually add value to the Hashgraph community and keeps the show ad-free. You can send a donation to enthusiast.hbar using your Hedera wallet. The full HBAR address can be found on the Twitter thread pinned to the top. Brought to you by listeners like you. And lastly, a reminder to join the Hashgraph Enthusiast Twitter community, a great way for Hashgraph newbies and early adopters to connect, team up, share knowledge and insights, all that good stuff. That is in the thread as well. This week, I've got some cool guests. I think we have Brady stopping by. We've got Patches hopefully stopping by. We got the HBAR Bull up here. We got King Solomon. Also, we have a new segment that I'll be doing later in the show called the Reddit Report. There's so many big and important convos happening on the Hedera community subreddit that has over 30,000 people in it. And I don't see a lot of people talking about it on Twitter. So we're gonna bridge some stuff. We're gonna have community legend over on the subreddit, Perfectability, up later in the show to give us an update on the conversations happening there. But there's too much to talk about. HBAR Bull, King Solomon's up here, Consensus 2023. I mean, big stuff going down. And I'm really curious, maybe I'll go to the HBAR Bull first. I'm really curious, just like, how is it? Like, did any of your flights get delayed? How you doing? Like, how was it?
Yeah, so to start off from me, it was an absolute blast. I went to it last year. There was certainly some differences this year that I noticed. I didn't have any of my flights delayed, but I'm sure that King Solomon can give us some stories on that. I know he had a heck of a time getting home, and I feel for him on that. But it was just great to meet some of these people in person and have some conversations, just good conversations, around a beer and things like that. The differences I saw at the conference itself. So I don't think there was as many presenters this year, so it felt a little bit more open. And not surprisingly, we're kind of in this bear market, so there's not as much capital sloshing around. But it was really engaging at the booth. So I worked the booth for a lot of the time, and it was engaging because before last year, it seemed like I was explaining Hedera and a lot of the benefits it brings to bear. This year it was more about, people that already knew about Hedera and wanted to figure out how they could build their applications or leverage their business off of Hedera. So that was the main difference that I saw this year.
Right on. I love it. And I know, King Solomon, you had, saw your tweet about your flight getting delayed and you got hung up in New York too. Like, did you make it home yet? How you doing, man? How was it?
Oh, dude, it was one of the most miserable experiences that I've ever. Well, I mean, I can't say that. I mean, a lot of people go through like crazy shit, but I mean, there was like tornado warnings in Austin. So I was talking to my wife and Valor Friday morning, and I'm like, they're probably going to cancel my flight. 5 minutes after I got off the phone, they canceled my flight. They rebooked it for 7 or 8 a.m. Saturday morning. And I checked at like 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and I would have missed my connecting flight. So I had to rebook from there. And then I rebooked and flew into JFK. And then when I landed, I realized that my connecting flight was canceled. So I went and stood at Delta for 2 hours. They got me on a standby flight at 8:30 p.m. and sent me to the wrong gate. And if you've ever been to New York and JFK, it's like one of the largest, most intimidating airports in the entire world. The terminals are all totally split. So you have to go through TSA every time you switch a terminal. They sent me to the wrong gate. So I went to the right gate, sat there for 45 minutes, and that flight got canceled. So then I paid $450 for United outside of Delta to go outside of the entire airport, go back into TSA again. I made it home last night at probably 11 o'clock at night. I'm still really tired. But yeah, I mean, it's a shit show flying anywhere. As far as the conference was concerned, I mean, that's like the first time I've ever been to like a really large scale conference like that. And one of the things that became very apparent to me is that I still think we're really early in crypto and Web3, like really early. But I also think that there's real builders in this space, and they're like few and far between based on how early that we are. And I think that Hedera certainly is one of the real builders, just based on some of the discussions and interviews that I was able to, get from that event. So, yeah, it was a great time. Like Brandon said, meeting everybody. I know Cooper had a barbecue. He was down there a little bit earlier in the spaces. We were able to make it over a little bit later and meet him, as well as, Jesse and Brandon from Twigital, fantastic. Patches, did an interview with May, did an interview with Mance Harmon, did an interview with Eric Pacini, who's the Chief Revenue Officer at Swirlds Labs, and then a bunch of other interviews across ecosystems. It was pretty amazing. I mean, a little bit overwhelming and exhausting, but yeah, pretty awesome time.
That's awesome. And I mean, I want to tap into a little bit what Brandon was talking about, just in kind of that, a trend that we're seeing about, of course we see the awareness and kind of mind share of Hedera and Hashgraph kind of spreading across the broader crypto ecosystem. Years ago, it might be the case that you talk to somebody at a conference about it and they have no idea what you're talking about. And I mean, Brandon, you've been at a ton of different kind of Hedera conferences and events and stuff and talked to many people. I know that last time I had you on the show coming off of a conference, you joined from the airport. And from what you're, from your vantage point, participating in those capacities, like if you take a moment in your mind and kind of travel back to your experiences at maybe conferences last year, even years prior, and your perceived sense of how many folks really knew about and understood Hedera at the time, how does that compare to what you sensed at Consensus 2023? Like, is brand awareness and knowledge of Hedera growing? Are there any conversations that illustrate this that kind of jump out to you?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, and this is just a year ago, 80 to 90% of my conversations were, discussing what Hedera was and, its attributes, compared to it was less than 10% of the conversations were along those lines. It was really all builders this year. The other thing that I really liked from this year was having builders in the Hedera booth. And I think that's something that, we're going to certainly, or I think that Swirlds and Hedera wants to leverage going forward. I don't know if you guys caught the demo that Patches did, and that was along with May and from Hashpack, who was also down there. But the implications for what Patches put together, and I hope he makes it on here because I don't want to explain it. He would probably be driven nuts by my explanation of what he built, but the implication for businesses is really impressive. And he spun it up in record time from what he told me. So it was good to have that kind of representation in the booth as well.
Yeah, he spun it up really fast. It was actually like, I think it was the day before or the day before that, he sent me a DM and he's like, "Oh, there's this thing I'm working on." And I was like, "Oh, you're building this right now?" And it like just the momentum and kind of the creative energy. I think that is the real benefit to having folks from the community representing kind of like Hedera at these conferences is it's just this crazy energy that matches the people at the conference. Kind of, if you're coming to the Hedera booth and you're kind of building and you're kind of like, what do I do? Where do I start? You're really talking to, like, if you're talking to Patches, you're talking to someone that's in the exact same boat as you are. Like, oh, I'm also trying to build on the network. And that's just, I just can see that creating so much momentum. And I imagine like maybe just to touch on that a little further, Brandon, is like you brought up kind of these peripheral gatherings and events and stuff like that. And we heard Patches talk about this in regards to NFT NYC, like sometimes just those ad hoc hangouts at bars and stuff after the conference are way better than the conference itself. Like, if you were to place value on the conference itself versus like all the different kind of random meetups you were having, like, was that a similar sense or was there really like that much value in the conference?
No, I think a lot of people would disagree with me. There was certainly a fair amount of value in the side events, especially because they were really actually, and Jesse, my co-founder at Twigital, probably would disagree with me as well because he went to one of the Google conferences and got so much out of it. And then there was another Google event that I went to and I got a fair amount out of that. And the FIS WorldPay, there was another event there. But personally, I got a lot more out of the event itself, learning about what else is being built, connections for Twigital, and things along those lines. I did get a lot more out of the event itself.
That's awesome. And King Solomon, like, I know you were there with Genfinity and you were on the interview tour. Like, you published a tweet or Twitter thread recently, just listening to people you interviewed, and I was like, oh my God, like, that's just incredible. And then I saw in the HBAR Bulls video this week, which was fantastic. I mean, if anyone hasn't had a chance to check it out, definitely check it out. But you bumped into Mance and you did an interview with Mance. I'm curious to know kind of like, what was that like? Like, it's always crazy to see Mance because we're used to seeing him like monthly at town halls and like really him and Lehman kind of being the face of Hedera. And now, they're at Swirls, they're kind of more behind the scenes. What energy did you get from Mance? What sense did you get from Mance? Like, is he feeling like really confident? I know that there was like a little bit of alpha tease in the teaser, stuff like that. So I think people are curious about what's going on with Mance.
I mean, dude, it was like, it was pretty wild because I was like, consistently going back to the Hedera booth. Obviously, I knew that I wanted to interview Brandon and Jesse from Twigital. I knew that I wanted to interview May. I actually kind of wanted to interview Zenobia and Christian from the marketing aspects. Didn't do those, but I asked. I literally randomly went up to Christian. I'm like, you want to do an interview? And he's like, well, Mance is right there. Why don't you just interview Mance? And he walked over. And he's like, hey, Mance, this is Solomon, blah, blah, blah. He does work across chains and, has helped Hedera with some bigger events and stuff like that. And Mance was like, yeah, let's do an interview. And I didn't have any – I remember Brandon looking at me and being like, you going to do this? And it was like I had 8 minutes of prep time. So I sat in the corner and wrote as many questions as I could think of to ask. And the sense that I got from talking to Mance, and I talked about TPS, which you did an introductory aspect into the show with. I asked about real TPS, and I don't want to spoil too much, but the phrase that was used from Mance was what we're seeing right now with essentially over 1 billion transactions every 3 weeks at this point in time. Real transactions on the network is literally a drop in the bucket as far as what is expected to be coming in the future. So I did get some stuff out of that interview that I think is going to be really valuable, and just looking forward to it. So looking forward to publishing everything. Yeah, so it was almost like starstruck with some of the people that I got to meet. Mance is certainly in that grouping. David Schwartz, the CTO of Ripple, was in that grouping. Like, it was pretty wild being able to actually interview some of these people that you've seen and are like really fans of for like 5-6 years in the space, and never thinking that you would ever be in a position to actually talk to them, let alone interview them and publish content and do everything else. So pretty crazy.
Maybe I'll ask this to you first, King Solomon, and then I'll ask Brandon. Is what other like booths or people or projects or whatever, like, was there anything that stood out at Consensus, like that maybe you didn't expect? Like, I know maybe there's other L1s there, or maybe there's some of the usual suspects, but like, was there anybody that you bumped into, or anything that any encounter that you had that just was really interesting and unexpected and really cool?
I mean, I don't think like, I was not like super surprised by any project that I walked by or talked to down there, but it was more so just the connectivity aspects, like people wanting to, like, ecosystems wanting to be interviewed and having discussions around and everything else. Like, we did as many as we possibly could. We tried to branch out, but there was like kind of like some pretty cool gamification aspects like that I saw that really looked slick. But then something that did surprise me was that, like, some of the booth sizes and like where some of these organizations and ecosystems are spending their marketing dollars, and is it really like kind of even justified? Like, I hold a little bit of XLM and Stellar, and like Stellar had a gigantic booth that, like, it wasn't even a booth. It was like I don't know, Brandon can probably even explain this better than I probably could, but it was like an entire, like a house. Like, that was how big their aspect of Consensus was. But like, there wasn't a whole lot of people there. It was like, well, why spend that much money doing it? And Hedera's booth was like, I would say 6 to 8 times bigger than like the smaller booths that were there, and it was like the perfect size because I consistently saw traffic. It was like right down the main center aisle that you would walk through. I don't know. It was just pretty. Honestly, dude, like, it's hard to even explain because like there were so many networking aspects that were really great there, and I think from what Brandon said, like, he getting a lot of value out of the booth aspects and just being there. My experience is kind of a 50-50 where we got a lot of value walking around and meeting people, and we certainly made a lot of networking contacts, but like trying to bang out and do as many interviews and talk to as many people as possible was like, we were kind of thrown all over the place. And it was really cool. Like, we were trying to be strategic where it's like, look, there's like 80 or 90 booths here or whatever it was. And, we don't need to interview all of them, but we want to interview the ones that are either layer ones or layer zeros, or that we kind of want to showcase. So we were able to interview Kava, which was pretty cool. We were able to interview Findora from the privacy aspects, which was pretty cool. We obviously did Hedera. We did Constellation, the CEO of Constellation and DAG, which was really cool. David Schwartz, we did Mance Harmon, Eric Bassini, May, Brandon, Jesse from Twitch. We did Patches at a guitar shop, which was really cool. I don't know. It's just kind of an experience, but it's almost like it's impossible to like try to just bang out interviews for the sake of banging out interviews, because at the end of the day, Valor from Genfinity has to edit and push them out, and it's like, how many can we actually do, and which ones do we want to and need to do? So
yeah, absolutely. And maybe I'll throw that same question to you, Brandon, which is like, again, floating around the conference, hanging out with people. I know you spend most of your time in the booth, but like, actually, you know what? Maybe I'll change the question a little bit, because I know you definitely kind of man the booth quite consistently. Like, of everyone who visited the Hedera booth, who surprised you the most? What was the most interesting visitor to the Hedera booth that you saw?
All right, so I want to answer that, but I also want to answer some of the other questions as well. And unfortunately, the most interesting conversation that I had was somebody that ended up being pretty interested in Twiddle, and he asked to remain anonymous for now. So I have to hold off on that. But I also, there were several people that came through that checked out Twiddle. There was a museum curator that got really interested in it. And it was just, it seemed like Twiddle was something different for a lot of the people that were just coming through, something interactive that they could play with. Going along the things that King Solomon was talking about booth size and where they decide to spend their dollars. I think Hedera actually, or Swirlds Labs, did put a fair amount of money into this conference, but it doesn't necessarily all have to go into the booth. Like you have these sprawling areas that, some of these entities like Circle, and he mentioned Stellar, there'll be these sprawling, just general areas. It's not even a booth, and there'll be places to sit down, and they'll have TVs, and they'll have different sections and things like that. Hedera decided to go with a smaller booth. It was 10 by 30. But they also put some money into some other things. Like they had a separate conference room on the second level that people could go up there and block off time for different things. So, for example, Twiddle and Turtle Moon Patches and another Unthink AI, which is an AI platform that's leveraging Hedera as well. They all went up there with a VC. And apparently, and I wasn't up there, Jesse was doing the pitching for Twiddle, but it wasn't like one at a time. Like it wasn't that Patches would pitch and then Jesse would pitch and then Tina would pitch. It was that they were all playing off of each other of how they could use the platforms all together, like really showing the ecosystem aspect of Hedera. So that was really neat. And yeah, so you don't necessarily just spend all your money on the booth. There are other things you can leverage at Consensus. But the other thing that you mentioned, what was some of the other booths and what was interesting there. And the thing that really sticks out to me is the St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. So they're doing some things, in Web3. And, I don't want to talk out of turn. I don't want to talk about exactly what we were thinking about doing because it might be something that comes to fruition. But they were talking about, we were talking about ways they could use Twiddle. So, and I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to leave in about 5 minutes. But great experience across the board.
I love it. And then just before you go, I just wanted to tack on that last question. Just again, you being kind of at the Hedera booth. I remember last conference you mentioned someone like from the White House or something stopping by the booth or something. Were there any kind of like people that stuck out that visited the booth where you were like, what are you doing here?
There was some of that, but I guess because of last year, the big surprises kind of came out last year, and I didn't directly talk to some of the people that kind of surprised us at the booth, but I know the government from Ontario was there. But I know you look down at people's badges and are surprised. I had a conversation with Fidelity. I saw Pepsi was there. And there were several others that all of a sudden you're having this conversation and you look down at their name tag and they're either this impressive government or, large enterprise.
Hey, I will say, Brandon, and I don't think this is stepping across the line here because there's nothing that I can say because I don't know, but talking to a couple of the people we were able to interview and talk to from Hedera, whether that be Mance or Eric or maybe whoever it may have been, it seems like there are quite a few more governing council members that are lined up that just haven't been announced yet. And I'm really I don't know who they are. They seem to be really excited about who they were. And I have no idea, to be honest. If I knew, I would tell you guys, or at least I might DM some of you guys on the side and be like, don't share this shit. But they seem to really excited, and I think there's a lot coming down the pike. At least that was what I got from it. So
Yeah, there's definitely some more coming down the pike, but I mean, it doesn't matter if it's how we're dealing with government. I mean, how many times have you seen a layer one have representation, in front of Congress? And Nilmany did a fantastic job. I haven't even heard all of it. I just heard her opening statements and what she had going on at Congress. But impressive across the board. Again, Brandon, I'm going to probably have to jump off here in a couple seconds, but I see Patches just jumped up, so it's probably a good time for me to jump off.
Oh yeah, well, it's always a pleasure having you, man. Again, if people haven't watched your latest video, you got to go out and watch it. But thanks for stopping by, man. I really appreciate it. As mentioned, Patches is up here. Patches, Hgraph, rocking with a demo. Stuff's going on. He's in secret rooms with VCs. All sorts of things going down at the conference. Patches, how are you doing? Any flights delayed? Did you make it home okay? How's it going?
Yeah, definitely delayed flight, but made it home just fine. Gave me some time to take a lot of notes and compile a lot of things in the airport with the extra 4 hours because I had nothing else to do. So it forced me to do busy work because otherwise I'd just been bored. But yeah, it was definitely, I would put it up there with the best conference I think I've ever gone to in terms of, the opportunity. ETH Denver was not this. ETH Denver, I think there was like one or two pretty good contacts that were looking to do exactly like what I was hoping to get out of it. A lot of good connects, a lot of good connections, and don't get me wrong, like going to ETH Denver was worth it. But this was just a highly potent place with opportunity and businesses looking for solutions, and it's consensus, right? So how do you do this fast? How do you come to consensus, and how can you help me? Hedera is just uniquely positioned to be the one jumping up and down with bright red flags saying, come over here. I think some of the main things weren't even out external from Hedera that I was really excited to do. Like I pretty much talked to Mance exclusively for 45 minutes one-on-one in the booth, which is just an opportunity, like that does not happen often. And it was really just kind of like a great conversation that, yeah, I wish I would have recorded it or remembered most of it. Seems like we were vibing. He loved the demo, which really felt good to get that validation that what we're doing is bringing that Web 2 user experience, but have Web 3 underlining is in line with where we need to be going. And yeah, I got to talk about AI with Mance, which was really cool. And it's just kind of like the future trajectory of what Hedera is going to be doing in the next couple of years. Got to meet CFO of Hedera proper, so like the governing council. Got to meet the CFO of Sort of Labs, which was really cool. And then the conference started. That was all like like day one stuff. And then there were also 2.5 days, which is a blur. My contact sheet of like really fruitful, good conversations, either cross network, collaborations, either partnerships, possible development work, because Hgraph is now an enterprise development shop using Hedera to solve enterprise problems. And there's a lot of lucrative leads there. And then it's very, very good conference. It was amazing to jam with King Solomon. So there was even like a personal element that was just, talk to this guy so much the last 2 years, never seen him. Now we got to jam out in a guitar shop, and that's in Austin. And that was really cool with Valor and Jesse from Twitchable, and just a really good bond making, really, really good human to human interactions when we're always staring at digital screens.
Yeah, apparently there's a new record dropping. The what is it? The Rise of the Turtle King, or that's the title, right? That's the working title.
I like that title,
yeah. something. Yeah, I mean, I forget what I think the band name is going to be called Taco Velvet.
Taco Velvet is so good. I read that and I was like, oh, that's a good band name.
Yeah, and the first album is The Rise and Fall of the Turtle King or something like that. Yeah.
You want to get sued by that taco shop we continually went to because it was so amazing. This was my
Patches apparently is a taco connoisseur to the point where he was telling people like for 2 days straight, it's the best taco that you'll ever have in your entire life. And like, yeah. And I was going to try to throw the vegetarian name in there with like the vegetarian taco velvet king or something, but I think Taco Velvet's a really good band name. And I think the rise and fall of the Turtle King is, that's what we're going to have to plan. We're going to do it digitally. And we're gonna release an apocalyptic album NFT that burns and rugs you like in real time. So
That's exciting.
We talked about none of this, but I'm here for it.
100%. Now, speaking of talking about things that nobody knows about what you're talking about, it sounds to me like there's a lot of interesting things going down in kind of that room on the second floor that Hedera had. I mean, HBAR Bull, Brandon, he was mentioning, Patches, you and Jesse and some folks were the VC in there, and you were chatting with Mance and stuff. Like, obviously some of those conversations were private, but like, can we spend a little more time in that room with you? Do you remember any other cool things that happened kind of behind the scenes there, or even just at the conference in general that people might find interesting?
I don't know about too much of behind the scenes. It's pretty boring. It's like, well, do we have these papers ready, and are these stickers aligned? But the conversation that, I've pitched VCs a lot in my career, different settings, different angles. I've never pitched a VC where it was 3v1. You're always outnumbered by them. And so it was very organic. We came up to go in the room, and Jessie was there, and I forget her name from Unthink AI. She was a gem. She was really nice. She was there, and then the VC came in, and Jesse had like a meeting with him, but then I was like, oh, well, we'll leave you to it. He's like, no, I kind of want him to get the vibe of the whole ecosystem. And then we continually like told a linear story of how Hedera helps use cases. And then, Twigital was talking about how you can like create 3D objects and tokenize them. And then Hgraph was there as a decentralized database where you could organize and index them. And then Unthink AI was there, was like, hey, you can turn them into an AI-generated store that's centric on content that people are making, which is what Unthink AI does. It's really, really cool pop-up store affiliate demo for when you create a blog about hiking, and then it reads your content and pulls in the most competent affiliate links. You agree to it, and then you have a little pop-up store that you can gain a little bit of revenue from, generated through AI, which is very, very cool. So, it was an organic storytelling of soup to nuts, from all the way down to the database to how do you tokenize these assets to make them interactable, to how would it look like in a store. And then obviously you remove that regular e-com Web 2 experience and you put it into a metaverse experience or something in a 3D environment, and it all really just makes sense. So very, very cool pitch.
That's awesome. I love that. And like, it also too, just in general, like, I mean, it just must have been, you've bumped into folks before, like May and all those different types of things, but there were also people that you'd never met before, like King Solomon and stuff. Like, just touching on that again, like, and maybe I'll throw it, to you as well after Patches, King Solomon, is like, just, seeing people in person in the, as people call it, the meat space, and connecting, like, how, like, I hear over and over and over again, and I know myself, it's so different, but for folks that maybe don't get the chance to do that, as this ecosystem grows, as opportunities for more people to meet up in person grows, like, what's the best way you could kind of like communicate that value, or kind of how important that is, maybe from the standpoint of just being a startup, or someone like King Solomon with a community initiative like Genfinity and stuff like that. Like, I think that a lot of people kind of getting started in crypto kind of during the pandemic and all that kind of stuff, coming online with this, like, it's really important.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had the answer, and then my dog needed a treat. She was a good girl, so I kind of forgot.
That's okay.
The exact.
Okay, let me re-summarize. It was very cool seeing everybody in person, making new friends and seeing old friends. Any way to kind of make an impression on people, how important that is?
Sorry, yeah. So, I mean, it's paramount, right? Like a community that's that's not engaged with each other and knows what each other's doing is not as effective as a community that's intertwined. And I would even point to the demo that we were able to make that was possible through our partnership with Hashgraph, because we're in a community and we talk to each other a lot. And we, I presented them an idea, and if this is a thing that they would be willing to partner with us, they said yes. And then we had, I think, the coolest demo to demonstrate the speed and ability of Hedera to bring in a lot of really good user experience and onboard people who don't even know they're going into Web3, just like MasterCard, just like Starbucks. So yeah, it's extremely, it's hard to measure, but it's definitely beneficial that was like the second time I've hung out with May. We had a great time at ETH Denver, and it was great, just chatting with her again in the booth and after, going to parties and stuff. So it's community building in real life, and it's, you're getting comfortable with others in the ecosystem, and they can lead to partnerships, and it can lead to ideation that's not just centric to a wallet, not just centric to a database, but a loyalty program that needs both,
Love that. King Solomon, same question to you, like, just for a lot of people that were getting started in, Hedera or some other network and building, and at a time when not a lot of people could meet up and get together, like just refreshing into that, we're back into it. Like, it's so important to see people in person and go to these things. If you can make an impression on people, with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I'm a little bit of a wild animal, obviously. So like, it was pretty interesting going down there, like, obviously meeting Patches, because I think we have a lot of like, we have different ethoses, like in the way that we kind of not ethoses in the way that we like live life, but the way that we believe in this technology and the way that this technology is going to grow. And we have a lot of synergy and like thought around that. So like meeting with Patches and just getting to like literally shoot the shit off of spaces or off of just like random like initiatives that, not random, but like initiatives that like Hgraph or Turtle Moon or Genfinity's doing, and just like literally just talking about what we think about this space. I would actually say that probably the discussions that Patches and I were having were some of the best discussions that I had down there for 4 or 5 days, just because it wasn't positioned around anything with even Hgraph or even Genfinity or like any of that stuff. It was just like, where do we think this space is going to go? What do we need in these ecosystems? Like, because when you go down there and you're networking with people, you're trying to just present a very finite view on like, here's what I do. Are you guys interested in this? Let's show you a little bit about what we do. And it's like, it was really cool meeting Patches. It was really cool meeting everybody else down there, doing the interviews. Got a lot of ideas about, future spaces and potential for collaboration and everything else. But I mean, I think those, to me, the most valuable things that came out of consensus, and this is just me personally, networking is going to happen regardless, because we're all here. We're consistent in this space. We have that continuity aspect that a lot of people just don't have in a bear market or coming out of a bear market. Was meeting the people that I've like been talking to for like a year or two, and like seeing them face to face and being like, it's the same fucking dude that I've been talking to online. It's just like really cool to talk in person,
That's awesome. I love it. Well, before I get on to the next part of the show here, I wanted to just hit both of you one more time and ask kind of like, is there any other kind of highlight or cool moment that you want to share from the conference, or any kind of thing you want to plug or anything you want people to be aware of, just before I boot you back down to listeners?
Yeah, I'll start. So I was able to meet David Schwartz. So obviously like coming into crypto and getting so heavy into Ripple and XRP research for a good, I'm still doing it now, but the first couple of years after Bitcoin and Ethereum, like just, and starting to actually research, I dove really deep into those ecosystems. Meeting that guy was like, and then being able to actually like talk to because he doesn't have like, you can't just ad hoc be like, I'm going to interview David Schwartz. You have to go through a marketing person, or not a marketing person, but like a, whatever, his communications liaison and stuff like that. Being able to actually do it, and then saying like, you have 10 minutes to do it. This is your chance, do it or don't do it. And then being prepared enough to do it, because I've done it enough for the past 6 months where I know how to shotgun these interviews. it's a little bit of validation. Mance was an amazing interview, meeting with Patches, meeting with May. Akriti, who is at BCW, who deals in the Hedera ecosystem and multiple others, meeting with Ben Jorgensen, who is the CEO of Constellation and DAG. I mean, there's so many things to think about, but yeah, it was just really interesting. And I'm sure, like Patches said before, like, it was really a pleasure to meet Patches and go jam at a guitar shop and just be like, I don't get to do that shit very often. So pretty cool to be able to do that as well.
I love that. I have that video. It's in the thread. If people want to watch that after, it's surreal. It's super cool. Like, that's the other thing, is music connects people. So I love that. And Patches, maybe I'll throw it over to you just to wrap it up here on this segment, is like, any other cool highlights from the conference, or is there anything that you want to plug or let people know about just before I let you go here?
No, I think there's a lot of really cool things that might come out of this, and they're all too young that I think if I'd say it here, they might kill them, right? So a lot of really good connects, a lot of really good project opportunities that I would say I feel passionate about and would be great to impact. But for me, just kind of like Solomon, he got to interview, like, the king of Ripple, and I got to talk to Mance of Hedera, and having that much time with him, showing him the demo and getting that insight on it, having, telling him kind of like what our roadmap is and his thoughts on it. I think that's invaluable for us and our project. And then, kind of everything we've been talking about, I would have to call out Twitch. I hung out with Brandon and Jesse probably more than anyone else. Just we had the same booth time and we were hanging out, and those guys are freaking smart. Jesse is just like an accomplished architect. The ability of tokenizing assets, I think, was paramount. A lot of people understood the value add, and I think they might. I'm not going to say that, but they were a really good demo. A lot of people loved their demo in the booth. So definitely a huge shout out to Twigital and Brandon and Jesse for being such cool people and being able to meet them the first time.
That's awesome.
That's what I was going to say before I rugged real quick. And I know you're going to hunt me down because your next segment, but the more that I look into what Twigital and Brandon and Jesse are doing, it's like, I think there's a whole ton of opportunities that can really shine a huge light on what Hedera can actually facilitate. And I think that those guys are onto something that's really special. And yeah, that's kind of all that I have. So
it's Twigital. I love it. Like, honestly, the photogrammetry stuff and the stuff they're doing, it's like, it's next level. So, I mean, of course, huge shows to go as well. Thank you, King Solomon. Patches, thank you for stopping by. I'm going to kick you back down here. I love Twitter Spaces because it's like I'm doing a radio show and I can just like hang up on people, right? It's not like a Zoom call where I gotta be like, put down your hand. So let's dive into it here. I've got a new segment for the show because I noticed a bit of an information problem in the Hedera space. I've made a recent discovery that inside of our Hedera bubble, there are also bubbles inside of this bubble that need to be popped. And there's a Twitter bubble, and there also is a Reddit bubble. So what we want to do is we want to try to bring some stuff together and get things flowing. So this is a new part of the show. I've got a great guest up here, and it's called the Reddit Report because a massive portion of the broader crypto community is concentrated inside of Reddit, with plenty of deep, nuanced discussions and niche subreddits giving new projects visibility. One of these is the Hedera subreddit, with over 30,000 Hashgraph enthusiasts and newcomers sharing news, asking questions, and deep diving into conversations. A lot of these valuable discussions aren't seen by the Hedera community on Twitter, so we've got Hedera subreddit user Perfect Ability to break down the important discussions this week. Hopefully this new part of the show will help more useful info to the surface. And Perfect Ability, welcome to the show. I'm thrilled to have you on here to chat about what's going on with the subreddit. So welcome.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. This is my first Twitter space that I'm speaking, so this is really amazing. Thanks for everyone that showed up, and thank you for you guys for putting this together. This is really cool.
Okay, this is awesome. Yeah, I'm excited. So, I mean, you mentioned you don't spend a lot of time on Twitter and mostly spend your time on the Hedera subreddit. So, what draws you to Reddit and the Hedera community there? What sets it apart from Twitter?
I guess it's kind of like I just always been like a Reddit guy. Like I don't have any, like Reddit is the only social media that I have, and I just really love the way just Reddit is like structured. Um, One of my biggest issues with Twitter right now is that if you don't pay for the blue check mark, then your comments are not going to be to the top. And with Reddit, all the best comments, the most insightful that people upvote, kind of like likes, they get put to the very top. So if if you have like something really insightful, to see or to say, and you write in a comment, but you don't have, the blue check mark, then your comment's going to be at the bottom. And a lot of like, the bad comments get put at the top, unfortunately. So that's mainly like one of the main reasons I have, one of the main issues rather that I have with Twitter, but it's an amazing app. I mean, look what it does. It brought us all together, and we can do a lot of amazing things. But just Reddit is kind of more of like like my neck of the woods. I just feel more comfortable being there, and I've been there for a while, so I know like a lot of people. Kind of like Jeep. I think his name is Tom Dotson on here or something like that. He's on there, and he's just an amazing, and we connected, and there's just like a good community. Just as you can find it on Twitter and other social media.
Of course.
So
I totally feel you, and I love that because Reddit. I mean, Reddit's a huge player in Web3. Like Reddit had their massive NFT collections, and I don't think people truly understand the size of the crypto community on Reddit and the depth of the conversations, and that translates to the Hedera subreddit.
Right. Yeah. So what I did, I picked 5 topics, that were the number one topics on the subreddit. And for number 1 was the U.S. House Committee of Agriculture hearing. I thought that Neil Meany Rubin, the Hedera chief of staff and head of global policy, I thought she did an amazing job. Like she went over some synopsis, on where how the Congress can help, shape regulation. She brought up 3 use cases, which were the Tune FM, which people were not too happy about it because they're saying, of all the amazing use cases, she used Tune FM, but I think she just used it because, it's kind of everyone knows what Spotify is. So, sometimes when, you're talking to these lawmakers, they're not, on par with technology. So I think that was one of the reasons why, Tune FM was used. The other one was Dovu, which I'm sure was because of, tracking carbon. And the last one she used, for example, was the AVC Global for pharmaceutical integrity. And that was the whole tracking coronavirus vaccine. So I think she just used that just, to show that like with Hedera, you can have integrity in the supply chain and have, just everything on par with no fraud or anything. And I did a little digging on Neil Meany, and she is, like a badass woman. I was just, reading up on what, some of her qualification and what she's done. She was the policy advisor for the U.S. House of Representatives, senior advisor under Secretary of State for Political Affairs at the U.S. Department of State, worked as a consultant at Deloitte and Booz Allen Hamilton. And Deloitte, if you've seen recently, has posted a lot of job openings in Web3 and crypto building. So, hopefully they'll have some more use cases for us. They're currently building an Oracle system, but it looks like they're ready to amp up their use case. So that's pretty exciting. She also served as a VP for International Public Policy and Regulation Affairs at the Harris Corporation, senior advisor at the Center for Global Development. And throughout her career, Rubin has been recognized for her contribution in the field of international development and diplomacy, that she is recognized by the World Economic Forum as a young global leader. And after her after the hearing, when she said what she had to say, I think the cherry on top was Representative Dusty Johnson said, "Very well said." And if you guys can hear, I'm just going to play the last 30 seconds of what she said, just so you guys can hear what Dusty Johnson said.
Assets to operate, risks shutting out the ability to regulate the industry, and most importantly, risks removing the American people's access to the efficiency, transparency, and data storage tools that the rest of the world will be using to their competitive advantage. Thank you for focusing on policy for the next wave of digital innovation.
Very well said, Mr. Massett.
So yeah, that was pretty cool. Like she just said all that, and then he's like, "Very well said." So this guy, Dusty Johnson, he loves Hedera. Another talking point was his speech about, and here I'll play for you guys because
in this marketplace, as in every marketplace, there are fraudsters and hucksters that seek to make money while unfortunately giving the whole industry a bad name. And the hits and misses are well known to all of us. You have hits like Ethereum, Hedera, Filecoin, and then you have outfits like Banana Coin, Kodak Coin, and Mooncoin. So those.
Yep. So right there, Rep. Dusty Johnson just showed us what he holds in his wallet. It was awesome to hear him mention that. And Rep. Dusty Johnson, he's a member of the House Committee on Agriculture and Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, which is really awesome because the House Committee on Agriculture, the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, they include aviation, maritime, highway, transit, railroad, pipeline, hazmat, and water resources. So you guys can see where, like him liking Hedera can branch off to, which I think is really amazing. And I'm going to pause here for a little bit. Brent, do you have anything to add, or anybody else that want to say anything about the hearings or anything else?
Well, I just want to say perfectability. My goodness, I remember we had a conversation, and I was like, "Oh, we got to figure out what's going on Reddit. I got to have you on the show to give us some updates." And like, you've got clips, I could hear you shuffling through notes and stuff. So this is amazing. So to be honest,
I did my homework.
This is the thing people need to know is like, on the Hedera subreddit, it's so different from Twitter because you'll have someone ask a simple question like, "Oh, what's this about?" And someone will literally reply with like a paragraph response, complete breakdown of everything.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, I love it. That's one of the reasons is because, like you literally, you just have amazing discussions and, with the upvotes, people can just, see the best answer. Then you can just, go from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also too, like most of the time people just screenshot those threads and post them to Twitter. So I'm like, it's this information breakdown. So to be honest, you're really prepared. I'm enjoying this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a back seat here. I'm going to let you get through your other four, top fives of the Reddit report. And I'm going to enjoy it because I think this is fantastic.
Sure. I think, this would be a good time. We talked about Twigital, and I loved that up too, as Patches and King Solomon said. I think that's definitely something that's gonna be up and coming with the whole creating a digital clone, and the way I see like that expanding into the future. For instance, like for education, you can create like a twin of literally like anything. Sure, with Twitter right now, the technology is a little bit limited. You can probably just only do like small objects. But I think in the future with digital clones, you'll be able to do like pretty like massive objects. And for instance, you could be able to use that for education. Like say if you wanted to show your students like how big do you guys think the pyramids of Giza are, and with create a digital clone of it, you can put that say next to the school, and you can show like the kids how like truly like big and grandiose the pyramids are. Also with like heavy machinery, you can take a digital clone of that machine, and then you can inspect it to see if there's any damage to it. You can see like the hours on it. It's just really, really, really cool. So I'm really excited to see like what they can do, and that it's being built on Hedera. I think that's a really pretty exciting thing to look forward to.
Bitcoin or Ethereum.
Whoops, didn't mean to play that. And what else do I have in my notes here? I'm kind of shuffling here. Let's see. One of the interviews, Dr. Bear says, and I quote, "Ledgers are going to take over the world the same way that databases took over the world of records keeping on paper. It's the same thing." And I, like him saying that, that's just, it just kind of made my my goosebump just, like tingle a little bit. I totally see it. Like back in the day, like we took everything on, paper, if you just, records, and then databases came in and we were able to, like take that information and, be able to attain it faster, search through it, store it maybe, a little more secure, and, DLTs just take databases and just, just puts them on steroids. So that was a pretty exciting little snippet that, Dr. Bear said. And I think it's also important to, mention that I know a lot of people they don't like that Hedera is working with WEF just for, some reason that they think that's kind of like the Illuminati or stuff like that. But I personally think, it's a good thing because it shows the trust, that Hedera like has, like for government or these kind of bodies. They released a white paper just, recently, and on page, what page? I think it was on page 14. They mentioned that they're going to be using the Hedera Guardian, for carbon tracking. And also on page 17, they had a shout out to Flow Carbon, which is also using Hedera through the Guardian. And these assets are, verifiable, auditable, and discoverable in the Hedera public ledger. And this will allow for transparent communication to stakeholders, including governments and NGOs, with fully auditable and specific assets. Saucer Swap crossed 1 million transaction, which was, awesome too. And I mean, I can keep going, guys. This is like
here's what I'll say is what I'll say here is I think those are really the top of mind. Like those are really the big things in the Hedera subreddit. So that's really great, and that is the Reddit report. And I love this, and I think that as we kind of like it's interesting. Like there's so much happening on the subreddit. It's its own kind of crazy flow. And we want to kind of bring it into the show, let it come into the Twitter community here. And if you're on the Twitter community, go check out the Hedera subreddit. It's great. And if you're on the Hedera subreddit, come bring some of this information to the Twitter community and vice versa. I mean, the more that we can share this information, the better. Like I said, there are bubbles inside the bubbles. Let's break out of those and then break out of the Hedera bubble together. I love it. So Perfect Ability, I really, really appreciate you stopping by. This is far beyond my expectations. As soon as I hear a paper ruffling and there's notes and you've got like live clips and stuff, I'm like, all right, this is great. So really appreciate it.
Thanks, man. And before I sign off, there's one more thing I'd like to mention. This is it's not confirmed, but I think it's a pretty big breadcrumb. So apparently Tesla might be using Hedera, and the crumb is Avery Dennison started, tracking like battery emission and stuff like that. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on, because that would be, a pretty big, connection to be working with Tesla, just, because of how, Elon is and how much weight he still has in the crypto market.
Right. I think I have something here in regards to that as well.
Yeah. That'd be a really awesome thing to talk about, because it looks good. It's not confirmed, but it's looking pretty damn good.
Yeah. I think that the key thing here is, the tie-in is, Avery Dennison and the Global Battery Alliance or whatever like that. They're both referenced in Tesla's stuff, and Avery Dennison, the Atma.io platform is involved in the GBA and stuff. So yeah, it's like we don't know exactly, what network they're using or if they're leveraging Hedera through Atma, but I mean, if there ever was a breadcrumb, this would be it.
I thought so too.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, thanks again, Perfectability. Appreciate you. Was there any shout outs you wanted to give or plugs you wanted to give just before I boot you off?
I just want to give a shout out to you, man. Thanks for doing this.
Right on. Okay, appreciate you. And let's continue on with the show because we have a bit more news to cover. And shout out again to Perfectability. I mean, I reach out to guests for the show. I mean, I do have a lot of people reach out to me to be guests on the show and stuff like that, but sometimes it doesn't fit with the flow. Sometimes I'm not interested. Sometimes it feels like it might just be a bit of a plug or something. Usually the guests on the show are people I'll like ask. I mean, it's funny, like, recently the way that I get guests on the show is like, there's just a conversation on Twitter. Maybe someone gets mentioned or something like that. And I'll be like, oh, you should pop by the show. And they're like, yeah, I'll pop by. And it's like, oh, okay, great. Like, it's very organic. It's very cool. And I was thinking, and I was like, maybe I could try that with community members and stuff that have this wealth of information and are just looking at a whole other corner that a lot of people might not have time to pay attention to. And sure enough, great convo, Perfectability, fantastic. So the Reddit report, I like it. Now, we got some other stuff to talk about, and what I'll do is I'll take a quick. We'll bring the pace down a little bit for a minute here, and I wanted to talk about the whole TPS versus TVL thing, and where that conversation comes from. Because I like I was saying at the top of the show, it was late at night. I was feeling goofy. I put out a poll, and over 650 votes, and I basically asked, "What's the most important for Hedera right now?" I don't even think that was worded very well. Like, what's the most important for Hedera right now? That's a horribly worded tweet. Anyways, more TVL or more TPS? And the reason I asked this to the community was there is a conversation happening. And I think it was because when we had that step function in TPS, right, from single digits to 600 plus TPS back in January, I think that so many people in the community are hyper-focused in TPS being the signifier of growth for the network. And I think that a lot of people in the community were surprised after that step function that there wasn't a, hurrah from the broader crypto ecosystem. Arguably, it was, you could say it was kind of a negative response, like, these aren't real transactions, all those different types of things. We've heard it, we've seen it, we don't need to go over it again. But the bottom line is, it was a bit surprising. I think that a lot of people were thinking it was going to be a little bit different. And I think that the hope was for a lot of projects, startups, retail investors in Hedera, the possibility of new liquidity, of new users, of new accounts coming over to the network with more eyeballs on it, that would happen. And it turns out that TPS may not be the attention-grabbing thing, right? It might not be the hot new headline that's needed. And it may turn out, as the community is talking about, is, well, what's the tried and true crypto kingmaker KPI? It's TVL. It's total value locked. And there's a couple parts to this. The reality is that most big money in crypto and just in general is not really managed by humans, right? I mean, BlackRock hasn't used an analyst for decision-making in regards to investing for 20 years, and everyone's followed suit. It's AI, right? It's a lot of artificial intelligence making these decisions, and they are biased towards signals like, the TVL. Sorry, oh my goodness. They're biased towards things like TVL, and let me see here. I got my notes here. All those different stuff. I mean, let me see here. Lost my train of thought. I had a list of things. Anyways, the social engagement, amount of developers building on the network, all those, like just the standard metrics. And when we look at Hedera, it's like it's TPS, it's a hash graph, it's not a blockchain. It doesn't tickle the AI the same way that other networks might throw off some of these signals and get some of this big money in. And it does seem like, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of when Google search was getting really, really big, and it got to the point where it was really the key factor in the success of a company is your ability to appear and rank high in search results. And a lot of people stopped making websites for humans and they started making websites for machines, right? For these algorithms. And the quality of these websites went down because they were effectively trying to game the algorithms that ranked websites. And those algorithms were slow to adapt to those things. And also there were incredibly innovative websites that just, by their very nature, went against the biases of these algorithms and AI. So all these different types of things. I think that on one hand, it might just be par for the course that Hedera and their kind of counterintuitive strategy when compared to other networks in the crypto space, they might not get the attention of this, AI controlled big money. I mean, most of, if not all, like all of the money invested in Hedera, the network, is, managed by humans. And a lot of money in a lot of these other networks is not. And that's because Hedera isn't throwing off some of these signals the same way that an AI would. So what this conversation around TPS versus TVL really boils down to is, do we play the game long-term versus short-term, right? Do we play the game? Do we tickle the AI? Because there are upsides and downsides to both of that. Now, there's another side to this, right? In the midst of the community looking at TVL as a new pathway for tipping the scale in regards to adoption, right? Throwing off some of these signals. The other side to this is, of course, TPS. And in response to this poll at Consensus, the HBAR Bull was interviewing Brady Gentile from from Hedera, head of marketing at Hedera. And, the HBAR Bull was like, there's this poll from, Brandon, from itsbrandond on Twitter, blah, blah, blah. And Brady and the HBAR Bull as well, they highlighted another component to this that I think the community overlooks. And that's the long-term strategy component to this, right? If we're talking about TVL, largely what the conversation around TVL for the community is, listen, we've got to play the game. We've got to send these signals. We've got to get the attention of the AIs investing all this money. And we have to play that game a little bit in the short term. But we look at the long-term strategy, TPS. And what Brady highlights is really what it boils down to is this. You've got all of these different mechanisms and incentivizations that have to play out on a network for people to build, for people to stake, for nodes to run, all these different types of things. And where does the capital, where does the value come from to make those things happen? Transactions, fees paid on the network, right? And with Hedera, we've got, HCS transactions, which are a fraction of a penny. Then we have certain other types of transactions, for example, a smart contract transaction, which could be 5 cents or even greater. So we need to increase the variety of transactions happening on the network. We need to increase the amount of transactions happening on the network, because the reality is this. In a bear market, and I've talked about this a lot, in a bear market, a network like Hedera, we can't really think of it as a projectile, right? As something that we have to build momentum and launch and see how far it goes. It really is like an engine-powered aircraft that has to stay in the air. And the thing that is ultimately going to keep it in the air long-term is transactions, right? And that's what Brady's talking about, is he's saying, without that engine, if we can't get that engine started, like some other networks, and so, it's happened to them, like they've just fizzled out, they've collapsed. And, at networks in the future, that will happen they don't have these kind of sustainable business models. And That's what this really boils down to is, again, a projectile versus an engine-powered aircraft is Hedera's in the air, and in reality, their job right now is to stay alive, to stay in the air, because the bear market's here. But, to reference Paul Graham from Y Combinator from years and years and years ago, is Paul Graham says the technology train leaves at regular intervals, right? And if you're in a situation where everyone's kind of cowering off in the corner and, spending way too much money on their conference booth or freaking out or all these different types of things, and you manage to kind of keep things together, you might find yourself on a train car all to yourself as the train leaves the station. So it's this balance I see on Hedera's end, which is kind of like the long-term strategy versus the short-term strategy. And I do personally feel that there might be a little bit of a misalignment in regards to the priority that Hedera places on something like TVL, which, at a broader scale, you could argue is a little bit of a vanity metric. And then what the community and the use cases place on it. And to me, it doesn't matter if it's a vanity metric or not, if it matters for the long term or not. I think what this is really about is a conversation of decentralization, right? And the community's involvement with the network and the community's ability to influence the decision-making in regards to where priorities are placed in the network. And of course, Hedera is a very young network. It's still not fully decentralized. It's still not out of beta, yada, yada, yada. But even though the rationale from Hedera for TPS being priority numero uno, is in agreement. Like I do agree with that to a large extent. The reality is what this poll shows, and I think 650 people is a pretty large subsection of the Hedera community. 61% think that Hedera needs to place more priority on TVL. Really what that means is the community needs that. And it's not like they're just throwing it out there. I've heard so many conversations of a big bottleneck for growth for use cases on the network is just a lack of liquidity, a lack of investment, a lack of people coming over. And, to be frank, one of the key metrics that the foundation and Hedera look at is number of accounts. And so it's a bit of a catch-22 situation. It's we need more people on the network to generate more TVL, which will bring more people to the network. And I get that conversation because it turns out that TPS may not be the thing that accelerates that flywheel short term. And I think just to summarize my thoughts on this is really what this is about. Again, what this boils down to for me is we've got an organization, a startup with a 100-year mentality in a market that thinks in 5-minute increments. And you can be counterintuitive, right? A lot of things that Hedera does is very counterintuitive to the crypto ecosystem. And I think that plays out more often than not very favorably for H-Barbarians, for Hedera, all those different types of things. But also, I do think that respecting the community's intelligence is important because there might be something there, right? When 61% of folks agree that TVL is something that should have more priority placed on it, there's probably something behind that. There's probably something worth looking at. And there's probably what I think there's a short-term strategy that needs to be looked at and implemented because in my mind, if we look at the bigger picture and, AI really controls a lot of the large money and makes a lot of those decisions, and Hedera isn't throwing off certain signals that those AIs look at. And, do we play the game or not? Is it also a situation that you just get enough of TVL growth that you just tip the scale just enough that you start to impact how crypto networks are evaluated. Is that also part of this, right? Is Hedera such a disruptive technology that it could very well change the way that crypto networks are analyzed? And there's a few kind of comments and conversation tidbits from the comments inside of the Twitter post I did with that poll that I just wanted to quickly highlight. So at Investology says, it's fascinating that we exist in a market and a time where rather than validating Hedera's capabilities, higher TPS has resulted in increased skepticism amongst the unenlightened. I'm often dumbfounded by the crypto space. So again, that's kind of this other side of things, is like, it is clear that this is a really important thing, and you could argue it's the future of crypto, right? And that's one side to it. At Mr. Ranger Park says, more TPS equals more companies building on Hedera equals more transaction fees equals more sustainable staking. More TVL equals less in circulation equals more positive price action equals higher market cap equals more new users. So clearly, those two things work together, right? And it does show that maybe there's a little bit of a misalignment, maybe a bit of imbalance, and maybe there's a room, maybe, in this bear market with tight budgets. Maybe there's room for a little bit more of an initiative surrounding TVL for Hedera. Maybe it's already underway and we've got to be, patient. Who knows? Richard Bear, who I believe also was kind of on the original Hedera team, tweeted, "What about TVD? Total value delivered. A company may have 10 TPS and $1 billion in value tied to that 10 TPS. We don't have a good metric for what matters, the total value of the utility of the network." So that's also interesting. Also, too, not in this Twitter thread, but we saw Scott Thiel from DLA Piper mention TVR, total value represented. And those kinds of things get me thinking about, a recent tweet from Brady, who, I mean, if he makes a last-minute appearance on the show, that'd be amazing. I think that he's probably just super busy after Consensus, so maybe we'll have him on another episode. But 'cause I really want to ask him some of this stuff, so I have some questions for him that I'll probably save in my old back pocket for later, because some of the things he was talking about on that interview with HBAR Bull was just amazing. But back to what the kind of like TVR type thing, total value represented. A tweet from Brady that he sent out was regarding the Diamond Standard use case that we talked about last week, and the fact that they've tokenized $50 million in diamonds on the network. And of course, I don't think that that's going to move the needle on the old TVL ticker on DeFi Llama. But it does raise questions in regards to, are there other ways in the future that in a widespread way, change will occur in how folks evaluate networks. I phrased that horribly. The way that we analyze networks and value them, is TVL going to continue to be the core of that? Or are there going to be more things? Or is TVL going to be expanded, right? Could these $50 million in diamonds be included in TVL for network, or total value represented, or total value delivered, or whatever it is? I think that there's many sides to this. Also, Brady says, in the thread itself that I posted, the more useful metric involving TPS for HCS is diversified, the number of individual applications driving, the percent makeup of TPS is too centralized in just a couple of applications today. So that's also a great point to kind of add a little bit of color to the conversation is, yeah, TPS is great, but the other thing to look at in addition to how it impacts revenue is also the fact that it really is a small handful of use cases driving that TPS, arguably one use case at IO driving well over 90% of that TPS, and also diversifying the types of transactions happening. Again, 95% of those transactions are HCS transactions where those fees are, fractions of a cent. So we need to see diversification on that front. Also, Matt Smithies from Dovu says in this thread, to be honest, Hedera needs the BSC or Polygon moment for the quote click to happen, that folks understand that the same DeFi foundations can be deployed at a low predictive cost, but with the integrity of layer one. So there's also that, which kind of ties in a little bit to what I'm saying is like, do we just need a slight detour in strategy for a little short-term push for TVL, just enough to flip the scales, just enough to tickle the old AI decision makers at BlackRock to, take another look, open things up? Is there something that we should be curious about? Because that could be the switch that gets flipped and gives us our kind of, HBAR moment, right? Lance from Pixify says, TPS only tells part of the story. We need a good mix of transaction types that shows significant use of all capabilities of the network. Ideally, many of the use cases push daily active users, TVL, and values settled. Definitely want more than a couple decentralized applications making Hedera consensus service go burr. So, again, pushing that further is we need that decentralization, but also we need to focus on other goals. In my mind, the TVL versus TPS debate really, again, boils down to long-term thinking versus short-term thinking, and also recognizing the different pressures and struggles that Hedera is going through right now in a bear market, with a lot of their peers, completely imploding, and the short term serving the long term, and I think understanding a little more the perspectives of Swirl, Hedera, the foundation, in regards to the community's opinion that more focus should be put on things like TVL. Do we play the game? Do we get in the mix? Or do we continue being the odd duckling, and just kind of, do we need to keep our hands and arms inside the roller coaster at all times? Who knows? We'll have to see, but that's basically the conversation, and it'll be one that's ongoing, I'm sure. Also, too, just another couple things here. Just chatting about Twigital and stuff like that, and Jesse was mentioned on the episode. Jesse published a great Twitter thread, his top takes from Consensus. Number one, meeting many IRL for the first time, including the HBAR Bull. Those two have been in business and they haven't met together yet. Number two, gratitude levels full for too many to list, but need to thank Hedera Swirls Labs for the opportunity for providing live demos front and center. Number three, some of the most memorable experiences of the week occurred off-site and were not sponsored by anyone. Number four, cannot possibly be more humbled for the reception Twigital received generally and more specifically from a few places that have us shook in the best possible way, maybe, referring to those closed-door talks up on the second floor. And there's a few more here, but definitely go check out that thread. The more that I read from Consensus, the more FOMO that I experience. Aberdeen, recent governing council member, and as in recent, I mean in the last few months, a piece in Ledger Insights published April 25th. Asset manager Aberdeen hints at a tokenization plan using Hedera DLT, and there's a key quote from here that I wanted to just quickly read to you. So Russell Barlow from he's the global head of alternatives at Aberdeen, and he said, quote, "We would look to use Hedera as the tokenization provider for the tokenized offerings that we're putting out. That would be seen as a regulated security, so that comes under our current permissions." He also says, quote, where we really see the opportunity is in the broader adoption of digital securities as the next evolution of the of the market infrastructure. And so really this is like, one more key point here, in regards to just specifically public DLTs. This is really important. Quote, "Personally, a lot of what we've seen has been on permissioned blockchains on private networks. That doesn't feel as though it's the future. That doesn't feel like why all of us here, why all of us are here and why we're interested. It's really the idea of a much more open source and broader access." So we've heard that quite a bit from a lot of these enterprise use cases, kind of stressing the importance of a public network. And this is great to see. So, Shane, CEO of the HBAR Foundation, mentioned recently, 80% of current governing council members are building use cases. Clearly, Aberdeen is one of those. And this will be a story we follow closely. I mean, tokenized securities on Hedera. My goodness. That's exciting stuff. Deloitte is doing some pretty big stuff. So they're hiring and they're jumping into crypto head first with hundreds of job listings, which is kind of sudden. Also, too, there were many rumors of a quote big four kind of finance accounting firm joining the governing council. That was kind of a rumor. So if we look at this as a potential breadcrumb, and also too, Perfectability was talking earlier about some other kind of Deloitte connections. I think that when we look at these kinds of things and we look at a big four potentially being a governing council member, Deloitte looks like if there was going to be one of the big four, it would be Deloitte. So going to keep this one on the radar as well. There's some great conversations around this on the Hedera subreddit, so definitely check that out. I mean, what else we got going? A new use case launched, leveraging HCS, the Hedera Consensus Service, and IPFS, is forum.io. So anyone that's familiar with 4chan, kind of an anonymous conversation board, baked into the crypto culture, love it or hate it. It is a part of crypto lore and just internet lore in general. And it's the perfect format for an anonymous, decentralized forum, right? Again, running on Hedera, where a thread would be a topic ID, and, you'd have conversations within that topic ID. It would cost to create a thread 1 cent US dollar, and then to reply or vote, it would cost a tenth or 100th of a cent. So basically, you've got these kind of interesting things coming together for like a really slick, really simple conversation forum, immutable, running on Hedera. And you really, using this, we've seen a couple of use cases like this, but seeing this type of use case again really starts to make you think about, the relevance of ad-supported content in the future, how these different websites support themselves, and also the user having a choice, right? Do I pay a microtransaction to this website to use their product, or is that cost subsidized by my user information being leveraged to serve advertisements? It's not to say one way is better than the other. It's just to say, with forum.io and some of these other things running on Hedera with, microtransactions, we got a choice. So try it out. I put a post on there. It was kind of cool. Like, I think that, I think that this is really awesome. Quick correction here. So creating a thread and replying is 0.1 HBAR, but the fee is the network fee. They're highlighting the network fee, but the cost for using the platform for those things is 0.1 HBAR. Forum spelled with a 4. So 4ORUM.io, forum, clever, kind of cool. Great. And I mean, one thing I will say though, if it's all green text, is there any green text? I don't know. Might be worth looking at. What else we got going on? Hashpack. You're running out of time. If you haven't got a gold backpack, if you haven't got a purple backpack, or whatever else is going on in the store that they launched. We talked about this with Tyler on a previous episode. Tomorrow, there's no more. Tomorrow marks the end. So you really have, 24 hours or so. You got to get into the wallet. You got to get it. And I'm not shilling this. The free backpacks. So grab one. I don't know what's going on. They're teasing there's going to be some kind of stuff going on or something like that. I don't know. But it's very interesting. It's very cool. There are also golden backpacks for sale. This is not financial advice, but if you are, thinking about making one of these, giving one of these a home in your backpack, in your knapsack, in your hash pack, you're running out of time. I'm curious to see what's going to be happening with these, but it's worth checking out. And I mean, also too, they're really, the actual thing that this is about for me is hashpack teasing, enterprise collaborations, those different types of things. We've seen other wallets in the ecosystem like Blade Wallet and stuff like that. I think hashpack is really interesting because, when we look at enterprise and those different types of things, enterprise requires infrastructure, but also I'm learning more and more that enterprise use cases in a network this small really need the community behind them to reach critical mass, right? And we've seen missteps by other enterprise use cases kind of being a little tone deaf to the existing Hedera community. And of course, maybe their core customers aren't inside of Hedera, but I think that it's so critical for any enterprise use case to have the community behind them, whether the community is going to use their product or not. A great example of this is FSCO, right? They do agriculture and food tracking and all these different types of things. They were at one time using the now sunsetted MasterCard Provenance blockchain product. They migrated to Hedera. I don't know who's going to be, managing, loans and sales and carbon tracking or whatever for $800,000 worth of shrimp or something tokenized on Hedera. I don't know who's going to be doing that in the community. But David, CEO from that use case, all have been the community. He's been a guest on the show. He's been replying to people in the community, keeping people informed. And the success that use case sees is really kind of, when these big enterprise use cases come sailing through these giant barges, they're going to bump up on these, on these rocks off on the shore. It's a narrow channel. It's a small network still. They got to get through. And if you bump up too much, you're going to get water in the boat. You're going to sink. So what do you need? You need tugboats. You need tugboats to guide you through. That's the community. FSCO is doing it right. And, I think Hashpack is positioned to, call upon those tugboats and say, listen, we got an enterprise product. Let's help them through. So Hashpack, I'm interested in watching that. We're going to see what happens. We're going to see what goes down. And the last thing I want to talk about, or actually second last thing I want to talk about, just popped up on my radar today. The 24-hour trading volume for HBAR is at almost $130 million, up 768% as of 3 hours ago. And that comes off of the back of consensus. So who is in a hurry to buy some HBAR right now, right? What's going on? Who's buying? Who's selling? And why are they buying so much? Maybe we'll find out. Maybe there's news coming down the pike. Maybe there was a lot of excitement at consensus, and maybe there's people going back to their, committee and all those different types of things. They're saying, hey, you got to buy some HBAR. What are you doing? What are we doing? So who knows? But yeah, quite a shocking statistic, a step function in trading volume. And the last thing is just fresh off the press, hot off the press. Masari Crypto published the Q1 2023 report for Hedera, and of course, the number one metric highlighted, up 52%, is TVL. Right? Great to see. Driven by Saucer Swap Labs, Pangolin, and HeliSwap. Also probably Stater too. God bless you. And all Hedera network services and key metrics saw quarter-over-quarter rise. And they also highlight Dell Technology joining the Hedera Governing Council. There's a lot of other stuff in the report. I myself haven't had time to dive into the report, but I'll take a quick scan now because I just saw it just before I was starting the show. Let me see here. What else is interesting here? Key metrics. We've kind of been so clued into all this stuff, guys. I mean, we don't really need to see a lot of this, but there are a couple interesting events highlighted from January 2023 that's worth checking out from this quarter. On January 1st, there were 108,000 new accounts created. Interesting. Early February, we saw the Pangolin launch. So we had 40,000 accounts created. And also too, there was another spike of accounts, created in March, almost 35,000 accounts. So interesting little account creation spikes. It's worth checking out. And then we've got, Saucer Swap, Heli Swap, Pangolin, rocking the TVL, which is great. And we did see TVLs have a blip during a exploit on the network in early March that we covered quite extensively on the show. Go back and listen to that episode if you'd like some PTSD. But we did see on January 4th and 5th, crypto saw 50,000 transactions on those 2 days, which is really interesting. I think that was just after the step function. And yeah, I mean, great report. Definitely go check it out. And that brings us to what an episode. I mean, my brain's kind of still computing what was talked about. I mean, that was a big week. So yeah, I mean, another week behind us and another week ahead. A huge shout out to everyone listening live on the Twitter Spaces right now. Another shout out to everyone listening to the recording on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And an extra shout out to everyone making a donation to the show, supporting it. I think we got just shy of 3,000 HBAR donation to the show. So I'm able to kind of make some improvements. I'm going to get a little new podcasting setup in my office here. It's going to keep getting better and better. Baby step functions for the show. Enabled by the community. So I think that's great. I don't want to have advertisers. I don't want to be plugging stuff on the show. I will if I have to, but I don't want to. If you have a moment, give the show a rating and review on your favorite platform. It helps a lot. So really my closing thoughts for the week is long-term versus short-term. I think that in general, Hedera excels at long-term thinking, right? Hedera excels at counterintuitive approaches on a necessity, right? It's a hash graph. It's not a blockchain. Different strengths. It's a disruptive technology. Not everyone's going to like it when they hear of it. But also, as we've seen, maybe there's room for more short-term thinking, right? Maybe there's room for a little bit of playing the game, maybe stepping outside of the governing council comfort zone, right? Maybe doing some things to help along the DeFi ecosystem and TVL and stuff like that. I think that Hedera, I mean, again, to reference Brady is saying, we want DeFi to have its, Hedera NFT moment. And that's their goal for this year. So we'll see how that plays out. But short-term thinking, long-term thinking, right? TVL, TPS, what's going on? We want to survive, but maybe we can thrive in a bear market too. Thanks for tuning in to Hashgraph News and Rumors, episode 74, TPS versus TVL, broadcast live on Twitter Spaces every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and made available on all major podcast platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts every Monday. Get all the info you need about the show and listen to past episodes at itsbrandond.com/HBAR. Huge shout out to the guests this week. Perfect Ability with the Reddit report. I'm super excited to be doing those. Fantastic stuff. Patches, the HBAR Bull, and King Solomon. Great insights from Consensus 2023. Make sure to join the Hashgraph Enthusiast Twitter community to share your insights, ask questions, and invite new friends. I think it's over 800 members now. That link is in the thread pinned to the top of the spaces. If you'd like to become a supporter of the show, feel free to send an HBAR donation to enthusiast.hbar using your Hedera wallet. The full HBAR address can be found in the show notes in the thread. I appreciate everyone tuning in, showing support, and sharing the show. And I'll see you live on Twitter Spaces next Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. For everyone listening live right now, as usual, I'm going to keep the spaces open just for another moment. If you see somebody that you recognize that you haven't talked to in a little bit, fire them a DM. Say what's up. People are working on new things right now. I'm having so many conversations with people. New things are happening. I guarantee you that person is doing something new and fresh. If you see a profile picture you don't recognize, well, you have something in common. You've been listening to me ramble on for the last, hour, 45 minutes. So shoot that person a DM. Say, what's up, fellow H-Barbarian? What's going on? Make those connections. And that's what this is all about. So with that, hello, future. Goodbye, past.